Later on, my wife and I was privileged to start a ministry in our own home. We opened our home to abused, misused, neglected, and thrown away children. We were privileged to take into our home 32 children that ranged in age from 18 months to 18 years. It was the ministry of the children that was first to open my eyes to something I had drastically missed. As those little children began to grow close in our home, the deep, dark, hidden scars in their lives began to come to the surface. And in those scars, I saw things that were not human. And every one of those children was crying out for help. And I couldn't help them. I didn't know what was wrong. But you see, God was giving me an education because he was about to show me what I had missed. I didn't know it at that time. I only knew that I could not help them. I felt so helpless in trying every day to talk to them, to love them, to help them, and I knew I still wasn't helping them. The last little girl they brought to our house was only 18 months old. 18 months old. And the day the state rescue workers rescued that little girl, they had to pry open the door to a cage where she was locked up with a cat. And 4 days, all she had to eat was the droppings of that cat. And the demon-possessed individual that had that little girl delighted himself in putting his lighted cigarettes out on the bottom of her bare feet. I don't know what you know or what you believe, but I want you to know that is not human. You see, there's another world out there. You ought to know about that other world. And that is not human. It is not human. I retired from the New Orleans Police Department in 1978, but I didn't retire from law enforcement work. I continued to work in private industry. I worked for 35 major oil-producing companies worldwide. My job was to train their personnel, procure the equipment, be responsible for the detection and prevention of illegal drugs in the offshore oil industry. 1979, some of my friends persuaded me to become involved in politics. They wanted a Christian to occupy the office of criminal sheriff in that jurisdiction. And since I had all the qualifications, I agreed to run. Campaign started in January of 1979. There was about 7 of us in the race. The primary election would be on the 7th day of August. And the top two, whoever the top two came out to be, they would run it off in the general election in November. Well, on the first day of August, we took a little unofficial poll. According to that poll, I was one of the two that's going to have to run off the race in the general election in November. I thought I was about to win a great victory. There was one particular bank in our community that was very influential in the political realm. I had a niece that worked at that bank, and through her, I made an appointment with the president and some of the members of the board of directors. I was trying to persuade them to support my campaign. They were very, very influential in that community. My appointment was 4 days before the election. I got up that morning. I wasn't sick. It was just like any other old hot, humid day down home. Slightly nauseated as a result of a long-standing sinus problem, but I wasn't sick. I told my wife I'm going to keep my appointment. I'm not going to have breakfast. I'm going to go in town and keep my appointment very early. I think I'm about to win this thing, and I want to win it as big as I can. I thought I was about to win a great victory, and I had an appointment at that bank that day. What I didn't know was when I left home, God also had set an appointment for me at that very same bank, that very same day, at the very same time. The only problem was he didn't consult me in advance. Now, he just made sure I wasn't late. Now, if you have problems keeping an appointment on time, I know one you won't be late for. I arrived in front of that bank. I parked my car across the street. I got out and started walking across the street toward the bank. My niece, sitting at her desk in the bank, looked up out through the plate glass window. She saw me coming. She got up from her desk, went to the door to greet me. We both arrived at the door at the same time, her on the inside, me on the outside. With one hand, she opened the door. The other, she reached out to greet me. As I stepped in the door, I dropped to my knees. She reached out and caught me. What's the matter? I said, I don't know. Just like that, I lost my strength. Just gone like that. And I'm having problems breathing, I said. Something's wrong. Cancel my appointment. I'm going home. I pulled myself together. I turned. I walked back to my automobile, and I sat down in it. And that's when the pain hit me. Like a mule, he'd kick me in the midsection. Like lightning, it consumed my entire body. I never thought to cry out for help. I never thought to seek help. All I could think of was, go home, go home, go home. I lived 11 miles from that bank. I started my car up and I started home. About halfway between the bank and home, suddenly I stopped breathing. Fully conscious. I couldn't breathe, couldn't get my breath. It was as though I felt as though my clothes were literally smothering me to death. I panicked. I braked my car to a stop in the middle of a busy U.S. highway, and like a wild man, I tried to tear out of my clothes. I don't know how, but somehow I suddenly realized I had panicked, and I forcefully calmed myself down. When I did, I could breathe, but with difficulty. I believe if I could hold my emotions in check, I would be able to breathe and make it home. I knew I was growing weaker by the second. I could barely lift my hand. And by now, I was hemorrhaging massively. But somehow, by the grace of God, I made it home. No one was there. The wife was gone. The kids was gone. I struggled to get out of the car. It's all hazy. I can't remember exactly how I did it, but somehow I made it inside my house and had been there only a few seconds when my wife came in. One look, she recognized the gravity of the situation. She got me out of that house, somehow back into the car, and rushed me right back into the town I just came from, right up in the parking lot of the family clinic. Just as she parked, one of the physicians pulled in and parked right in front of us. She jumped out, ran around, opened the passenger door, and tried to pull me out of the car. By now, I had no strength at all. When she pulled me, I literally fell out the door and landed on my face in the parking lot. The doctor who just got out of his car saw that. He rushed over to give aid. One look, he recognized I was in shock. He began to administer to me. They later told me what had happened to me that day. There is a main artery that runs across the back of the stomach. Evidently, a silent ulcer had formed on that artery and had eaten away the wall until it grew thinner and thinner and thinner. It ballooned out. They call that aneurysm. It ballooned out to such an extent that the wall of the artery was so weak that it couldn't withstand the pressure of the heartbeat when it got that weak. It was like sticking a pin in a balloon. Of course, they didn't know that there in that parking lot. They only knew that I was in shock and was bleeding massively. They put me in an ambulance and rushed me from the clinic to the local hospital. The local hospital was very small. The equipment was antiquated. The doctors conferred and decided the only way they could help me was determine first where the internal blowout was. So they were giving me blood and drip in every place they could. And at the same time, they decided they had to evacuate the body cavity because the cavity was so flooded that they could not pinpoint the blowout. But they discovered they were overwhelmed by the internal blood loss. I was losing it internally faster than they could get it out of me. After bringing me out of the shock the third time, my doctor announced that he had to have more sophisticated equipment and more skilled technicians. And therefore, he was going to have to transfer me to the regional medical center, which was 45 miles away. So they put me in an ambulance, hooked me up to all that machinery, assigned a paramedic to attend to me, and allowed my wife to ride with us, and we took off post-haste.